Hello everyone, Colin Cadet here from Woodwork Web. A number of you have asked to look at my workbench, and so today I'm going to take a few minutes to take you on a tour of my workbench, and maybe there's some things that you can use in your workshop that I'm already using, some tips and tricks. So let's have a look at the workbench. The construction of the fence is not unique. It simply uses 2x6s and 2x4s that have been arranged in such a fashion that the whole workbench is very stable. But some of the components of the workbench are what really make it work. The original bench used 2x6s on the top, and I like the stability of the 2x6s, but I wanted something flatter. I eventually moved to putting a high density man-made product on here. This is just an MDF. It's very flat. If you decide to put this on your tool bench and you're going to want to screw it down, make sure that when you screw it down, that it doesn't warp and bend, because when you screw this down, you can get waves in it, so you may have to shim up some sides of it. So keep that in mind. One of the most useful parts of my bench is this ridge that I put on here, and all it is plywood, 2 strips of plywood, and they are put on at 90 degrees, and they're actually fixed. They're on there all the time. And the reason for that is most of the material that I'm making is somewhere it's at 90 degrees, and if you're gluing or pinning or doing any kind of work with it, it's very, very quick to put 2 pieces together. You know that 2 pieces of wood are always going to be at 90 degrees, so it's very quick to align things up. This is one of the handiest things that I've had on any of the workbenches I've ever used, this 90-degree angle on there. That's a very useful item. The kinds of woodworking that I do, I very often want some extra light on my work so that I can see what I'm doing. For example, if I'm doing banding or inlay. These lights with arms on them that you can move around, you can pick these things up at thrift stores and garage sales and flea markets for $2 or $3. Very often they're missing their base, which is why they are sold for such an inexpensive price. But most of them just have a round plug in the bottom that would fit into a normal base. All you need to do in most cases is drill a hole, or maybe a series of holes around your bench, and you can have a movable light. In fact, you could have 2 or 3 of them right on your workbench so that you can see exactly what you're doing. And to go along with the light, in fact, most of the power tools, I have a power bar on here. In fact, I have a switched power bar because I want to have the flexibility to be able to turn power off to the tools right from the plug. A very handy item, and it's attached right to the bench so that you can grab stuff and plug it in and unplug it without having to fiddle with it somewhere. Very handy item to put on right on your workbench. Another thing that you're going to want on any workbench is a wood vise. And this is a very nice product. It slides back and forth, and you can reposition it just by moving this arm. If you're going to get a vise, spend the money and get yourself a decent vise. You will never be sorry that you got yourself a decent vise. Most woodworkers also find themselves being metal workers, and a lot of you either would like to have or do have a metalworking vise. Now I have one as well, but I don't want to attach it to my bench because I want to keep my bench as clear as I can with the minimal amount of stuff on it. But there are times when I want to use this vise. So what I do with mine, I use it right on top of my woodworking vise. I put a couple of bolts down, tighten that up, and presto, you have a good working vise here. Now you have to be careful because it's not actually attached to the bench. So the vise is only as strong as the vise underneath it. But for doing certain pieces of work that you do need a metalworking vise for, this is a great way of doing it. If you're going to be doing some heavy work with this vise, of course you'll want to attach it right to the bench. But for quick, small jobs that you need to do a little bit of hammering or bending or something, this works great. Now the last little item that I have is, again, the use of the vise. I actually have a belt sander that I've attached to a frame so that I can use the belt in a horizontal position like this. But I've even attached it to a foot switch. So to turn this on, you just simply use your foot, and then you can actually use this useful tool in a bench rest situation. I have a second attachment for it, which actually gives me a table so that I can set the belt sander, mount it to this, and I actually have a bench to work on, which I don't use very often, but it's there if I need it. So there's another idea that uses a double use for your bench and a double use for a belt sander. So that's my workbench. Pretty simple, very clean. The only other thing you might want to add, and you can probably tell I'm sitting on a stool. I use a stool from time to time because I use this surface for drawing plans and making small adjustments to projects that I'm working on. And it makes woodworking that much more pleasant because you can work at it longer without getting tired. And so that's my workbench. Maybe there's some things here that you can do to your workbench to make it as useful as mine is.